This is One Sentence News, a daily podcast featuring 3 news stories with a sentence-long summary and 1 sentence of context apiece. I'm Colin Wright. This is a sponsored message. I've been using Anchor as my podcast host for a while now, and it's been a pleasure to use. Anchor offers benefits that most other hosts do not. It's free to use, but it also has a collection of tools that allow you to create a podcast completely within the Anchor website or smartphone app. They distribute your show to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other distribution channels without any additional effort on your part, and you can make money from your podcast without any minimum audience size. So you can use it as a more traditional podcast host like I do, but it's also got everything you need to start a podcast from scratch. If you're keen to give it a shot, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It's Thursday, October 13th, 2022. Let's talk about the news. From Reuters, Chad climate disaster leaves record 2.1 million people hungry. The United Nations has said that about 2.1 million people in Chad are now acutely hungry, which means people who face the real possibility of starving to death after a severe drought followed by the area's worst flooding in about 3 decades, which began in July and devastated local crops and infrastructure, the latter of which has made getting food aid to those who need it difficult. The UN estimates that about 10% of all children under the age of 5 in Chad are severely malnourished, and about a third will have their growth stunted as a consequence of that malnourishment. From Bloomberg, Intel is planning thousands of job cuts in face of PC slump. U.S. semiconductor company Intel has announced that it will be substantially reducing its headcount soon, firing up to 20% of their 113,700 employees after a series of bad sales numbers, dire economic warnings, and new regulations put the whole of the global chip industry on high alert. There was some suggestion that the chip industry, especially in the U.S., would do pretty well in the coming months, as the U.S. government recently passed a bill that will provide them with all sorts of tax breaks, funding, and other benefits for building out new U.S.-based infrastructure. But a severe drop in consumer electronics sales, paired with a new set of regulations against selling high-end chips to Chinese companies, has made the whole industry skittish, and investors have felt the same. Global chip stocks, including those of titans like TSMC and Samsung, lost more than $240 billion in collective market value following that announcement about China. And from the Associated Press, France orders gas station workers back to ensure supplies. The French government has announced that weeks-long fuel shortages at petrol stations across the country will soon ease up and things will return to normal within the next week, following an official requisitioning of some striking workers at ExxonMobil fuel depots and petrol stations. There's a lot to this story, but basically, a large number of energy workers have gone on strike to protest the windfall profits being made by ExxonMobil and other energy companies, which isn't then trickling down to their employees. They're keeping those profits for themselves and not upping pay. The French government can requisition workers if they're needed to maintain public order and safety, which in this case means forcing striking workers to go back to work at a fuel depot and gas stations so that French cities don't shut down for lack of fuel. The strikes have been pretty effective in making the striking workers' point. More than 60% of France's fuel refining capacity has been offline, and distribution from the fuel depots to many petrol stations has been blocked. 2 unions and Exxon's leadership have struck a deal, but other unions are continuing to strike and block fuel distribution. If you're finding some value in One Sentence News, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your podcasts and/or sharing the show with a friend. You can find out more about this show or subscribe to the email version at onesentencenews.com. And you can support this and other related projects, like the Let's Know Things and Brain Lenses podcasts, at understandery.com.